By April 1945, the Third Reich was dying. Allied bombers droned day and night over a land reduced to ash. Cities like Hamburg and Dresden no longer had skylines, only smoke. In Berlin, Soviet artillery thundered closer with every sunrise. The promise of the 1,000-year empire had lasted barely 12. As Hitler's front lines disintegrated, so did the structure that had once held millions together. Men were gone, killed, captured or scattered across the ruins of Europe. What remained behind were the old, the young, and the women. For 12 years they had been told they were the backbone of the nation, the mothers of soldiers, the workers of the home front, the quiet believers in destiny. When the war turned, their uniforms changed shape, but not meaning. Hundreds of thousands of women served the Reich directly, in the Luftwaffe's flak batteries, the postal service, the medical corps, the field kitchens. The Helferinnen, female auxiliaries, manned radar stations, decoded messages, and carried dispatches through the rubble of collapsing cities. Others were nurses in military hospitals from Norway to Italy, witnessing the cost of victory that was never theirs. Propaganda had sculpted them into a single image, the Aryan ideal. Blonde hair, calm eyes, purposeful duty. They appeared on posters smiling beneath steel helmets, holding typewriters and rifles with equal ease. To the Nazi state, womanhood was a weapon, purity made visible, but when defeat came, that symbol turned against them. The collapse of Germany was not a moment. It was a long unravelling. In the east, the Red Army advanced through a landscape of terror. Entire towns fled westward before its path. Rumours moved faster than soldiers, stories of revenge, of mass executions, of women dishonoured. Civilians crowded trains, horse carts, or simply walked, a human tide heading nowhere. By May, surrender was less official, but order had vanished. Allied troops entered cities where hunger and silence ruled. The once proud uniforms of the Wehrmacht were stripped from captured men. Yet it was the women in grey skirts and field blouses who drew a different kind of attention. They had not fired guns, most of them, but they had served the Reich, and in the eyes of many victors that was enough. To Allied soldiers and liberated civilians alike, these women embodied everything that had been wrong with Germany: obedience, pride, cold precision. The defeat of Nazism was meant to be cleansing, but vengeance blurred the line between justice and spectacle. Across Europe, in villages from Normandy to Prague, humiliation became a ritual of release. Still, the magnitude of what unfolded cannot be separated from the world that birthed it. 6 years of total war had destroyed the boundaries between front line and home front, soldier and civilian, man and woman. Everyone had been part of the machine. When it finally stopped, no one knew how to start being human again. For the women in uniform, nurses, clerks, communications operators, their hair became the first casualty of peace. The symbol of pride that once fit the image of the German woman now marked them for punishment. The same blonde braids once celebrated on propaganda posters became proof of guilt. And so, when the shears appeared in the village squares, they did not cut only hair. They severed the last link between the myth of the Reich and the women who had lived within it. The war had ended, but Europe looked nothing like peace. From the Baltic to the Balkans, millions drifted through shattered landscapes, refugees, deserters, widows, orphans. Entire nations tried to remember who they were before uniforms and flags had redefined everything. The victors marched under banners of freedom, but what followed the liberation was often vengeance wrapped in justice. In France, Belgium, and the Netherlands, collaborators were hunted almost overnight. The liberation crowds filled town squares, jeering, cheering, venting years of humiliation under occupation. The most visible targets were not men in suits or soldiers in hiding, but women. They were paraded barefoot, heads shaved, marked with tar or swastikas, sometimes carrying infants born of the enemy. The act was symbolic, stripping them of beauty, status, and pride. Between 20,000 and 25,000 French women were publicly shorn in 1944 and 1945. Each haircut was a ritual of purification, a collective exorcism of national shame. That image spread across Europe like contagion. In Norway, Denmark, Czechoslovakia, and Poland, similar scenes unfolded. The same crowd dynamic, moral fury mixed with spectacle, became a language everyone understood. The shorn head became a warning, a new social scar. For nations that had endured occupation, it was catharsis. But in Germany, where the enemy was now the defeated, the meaning turned darker. When Allied forces entered Germany, they found a society already collapsing under guilt, famine, and disbelief. The once mighty Wehrmacht lay broken. The Nazi leadership was dead, captured or fleeing. Yet beneath the ashes, millions of ordinary Germans, particularly women, still lived in uniform. Some were captured soldiers' wives or Red Cross nurses. Others had worked in camps, offices, or anti-aircraft towers. Many had simply obeyed orders and survived. But to the victors, few distinctions mattered. In the Soviet-occupied East, vengeance was total. Red Army soldiers, many scarred by years of Nazi brutality, saw German women not as civilians, but as symbols of everything stolen from them. Some were executed, others violated, others humiliated publicly. Cutting hair became a quieter act than violence, but no less symbolic. It was degradation without death. Soviet propaganda called it justice by the people. For many, it was simply revenge that didn't require a bullet. In the Western zones, humiliation took a different tone, less brutal, but equally dehumanizing. French and Czech partisans held German female auxiliaries responsible for collaboration, propaganda, and silence. In internment camps, Allied guards enforced new rules. Uniforms removed, identification burned, hair cut short for hygiene. Some cuts were practical, others punitive. The distinction blurred quickly. Eyewitness accounts from liberated regions described the same pattern. The gathering crowd, the cold shears, the public shame. Sometimes it was spontaneous, sometimes ordered by local authorities as a means of control. The message was always the same. Your power, your pride, your gendered privilege under the Reich are over. You will look like what you are, die Fiat.